Welcome to the Sports Car Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Big Ken. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a streaming service, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified whenever I drop any new content. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I have another great guest for you today. I have Dave Schwartz, aka Iowa Dave Sports Cards, host of the Shallow End podcast. Welcome, Dave. How are you?
Ken, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I'm super excited to have you on. We met over a year ago. Like we met over a year ago, but last year we actually met in person in Chicago at the National.
You were busy. Your table was being swarmed, and so I was waiting back a little bit and just kind of waited for my moment, and then I struck and we said hi, and it was great.
You know, it's funny at a show like the National, and you should say that because that happens so much, even at other shows that shows that are busy. Like you'll be doing something, you'll look up and you'll see somebody standing there, and you'll be like, "Wow, that guy looks familiar. I think I should know him." And then as you're going through, and when they don't walk away, you're like, "They're coming to talk to me. I know they're coming to talk to me, right?"
Yep.
And then
they're
I'm like,
hovering. They're hovering.
I just hope they say, "Hey, so and so," because
Yeah. Otherwise, I'll give back the awkward, "Hey, you. How you doing?" And that's just embarrassing.
Especially at a show like the National, right? Sometimes local shows you're expecting, like I message with so many people now that they'll say I'm going to be there, so I pretty much know, because I don't know faces. Everybody knows my face, and I do you put your stuff on YouTube too, or is it just all just the
No,
podcast version?
I forgot my password for my YouTube channel, and so I have not really done that. I save all the recordings, especially the interviews. So at
Yeah,
some point, I might just upload them to a new channel. But no, I'm
yeah,
strictly audio.
yeah. There's isn't there a little button there that says forgot password or lost password or
Maybe. I think I'm just too lazy to locate it.
I have a small computer business, on the side here, and a lot of times it's funny. I'll go to a customer and they'll be like, "Oh, I just need to get back into my Gmail or my Google account," and I'll be like, "Okay, well, what's the pat? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, let's go to the cell phone. I don't own a cell phone. Okay, so it looks like the recovery email is this one." She's like, "Yeah, I've never heard of that email." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Well,
So
brother,
now
then you're starting
you gotta
over.
fill out this big long form and hope that they let you back into your account. So
I heard of
hope
someone a couple of weeks ago, and I don't want to take us too far astray from cards, but I heard from someone 2 weeks ago, not card related, just at work. They know someone who lost their Bitcoin key,
ooh,
and yeah, and they've got 2 or 3 Bitcoin on their, I don't know how it works, in their, I guess, in their cold wallet, however that works.
yep,
Um, and they can't get to it. And it's
yeah,
just, it's whatever the Bitcoin worth is worth on that given day, multiply it by 3, and that's what they can't get access to.
wow, that would keep me up at night.
Mm-hmm. Same.
All right, so before we get started, just give us a little background of who Iowa Dave is.
I am a lifelong lover of sports cards, but I'm not a lifelong collector. I had a really long break. I collected pretty heavily from about 83 or 84 through 1990, as a lot of kids do. Not surprisingly, 90 is when I turned 16, got my driver's license, got jobs, that sort of thing, and went off into different directions. And aside from, checking out eBay here and there for the quarter century after that, I didn't really do much with it until, like so many others, I got back into it, during the pandemic. I was always have been really meticulous with how I keep things. And so um, went down during the pandemic to see my dad down in St. Louis. And I thought, I'm going to get my sports cards. I've been reading and seeing how the market was starting to go up a little bit. And it seemed like a good time to sell. I didn't know how, but I thought it was a good time to sell. But my parents, God bless them, they never touched my that side of my closet for my childhood room. They still lived in the same place. And so everything was organized exactly as I had left it decades before. Everything, my favorite cards were in top loaders. Everything was labeled, my boxes. I had binders, and I knew where everything was. It was great. Sold most of it off. Got a few things graded, sold those off, and then kept one card. I kept one card that I got a PSA 10 on in grading. It was a 91 Upper Deck Michael Jordan wearing his baseball uniform, and it was before he actually had retired to go play baseball. So it was a gimmick type card.
Mhm.
And I threw it on eBay, and it went for a lot of money. More than I was expecting, right? Because it was like 2020 or
Yep.
so. And it was a Michael Jordan, and it was a PSA 10. And so I said to my wife, I said, I don't care if I keep this one, I'm going to go play with cards. And she was like, sure, go for it. And from that one card, it was like planting one seed in the ground, and it just grew and grew. And it helped that it was the funding for a PSA 10 Jordan back then, right? It wasn't like some refractor or wasn't like some PMG, but it was still Michael Jordan in
Yep.
2020 and a PSA 10. And so I just kind of went from there, and I wandered through the wilderness for a couple of years, buying cards I thought that I liked or thought that were cool, and then eventually made my way right back to baseball. And so that's mostly what I collect now.
Mhm.
I'm a baseball card collector of different generations of cards. I have a little bit of vintage, a little bit of players who are still active, but most heavily I collect from about 1980 through 2012. Just that's sort of my sweet spot, and that's where I will collect. Although I live in Iowa City, and I live about a mile and a half from where Caitlin Clark was playing for the last 4 years. Went to a lot of her games, saw her in person, and so I have started to build, sort of on the sly, a very small, modest women's basketball collection. I would never consider myself a collector of it. I rarely even post it because I don't want to feel like a fraud. But it's been fun just collecting a few cards of players like Clark, and other players who I just admired presently
Yeah.
and
Well,
also long ago.
I can tell you personally, just over this past year, I've done very well with Caitlin Clark cards. Her and Angel Reese mostly, just buying and reselling at shows, and I've talked about this a number of times, and I keep saying, okay, it's the end now, right? It's the end. Okay, I don't need to buy anymore. I don't want to, like, what I have left, I'll keep, and then I go to the next week, I go to another show, and everybody's lined up looking for Caitlin Clark cards. So I'm like, oh geez, I better bring some more. So then I restock it just keeps going. It never ends. It's one of those things that I just keep thinking it's going to be the end, and it's not. It just keeps going. I mean, I'm at a point now with her, and Angel and a few that I think all the way until October, when the WNBA Prism drops, these cards are still going to be very popular and still selling
And does Angel Reese, do her cards still sell pretty well for you too?
really well. I mean, she's playing, she's in a great situation in Chicago where she plays, and she's really becoming a star over there.
She has an awesome
So
personality, and she's talented, so it goes well
yeah,
together. Yeah,
yeah,
they,
yeah,
they definitely feel like it feels like the WNBA is having their bird magic moment in a way.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
maybe
Well, it was such a
hopefully it keeps up. The league is so fun to watch.
yeah, and it was such a solid draft class this year. I mean, a really, really big draft class, and such likable people in there too. There's a lot of people that just have really drawn, either to multiples or single people, and it's I mean, right now I was in Chantilly. Now I have a small collection of Paige Beckers right now that
Mm.
she didn't go to the draft. That she's going back to UConn for another year. But when I was in Chantilly last week, I mean, people were buying the Clarks and the Reese, and any Paige Becker, like all of a sudden they're already looking for her, and I think people are just trying to jump on early now. They want to be early to the dance next year.
How far are you from stores?
40 minutes.
40 minutes. Yeah, and Connecticut is not the biggest state either. So I imagine
Yeah,
that UConn,
an hour any direction, you're out of Connecticut.
right? That the UConn women must be sort of like the state team. I would think all the success they've had the last 20 years, 25
Yeah,
years.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, in UConn men too, just
Oh,
even with their
eh,
success as well too.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So it's and I did a lot with the Bowman University, the men's basketball too. This year was the first time I bought that. I mean, just buying the boxes. I started buying the boxes to get the women, and of course I ended up with 80% men and 20, because that's the way the boxes are designed. So I was selling a ton of those cards off too. In fact, I have a show coming up this weekend. We just had the draft. I'm going to go all the guys that just got drafted in the top of the draft. I'm going to pull those cards out for this weekend, and hopefully they'll sell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Good for you.
But it must have been great being in Iowa, with Caitlin Clark. It just must have been a frenzy for the last, I know the last year, but probably the last couple of years.
It did. Her first year, her freshman year, was the COVID year where people weren't allowed in to watch her play. But nevertheless, we knew that she was pretty good just because you could watch the games on TV and her stats were incredible. Team was okay that year. She had a bit of a learning curve, much like she's going through now, her
Mhm.
rookie year. But yeah, by the end of her sophomore year, we knew before the rest of the country that something was happening in terms of just on-court talent and how the team would play. None of us imagined what would happen her junior year when her profile took off.
Yep.
Right? That was when I think, the 2022 Bowman set came out. I bought a couple of refractors and I got her SI for Kids card, that kind of a thing. But when they started making that run, first through the Big Ten tournament, then through the NCAAs, that's when they lost to Angel Reese and LSU
Yeah. Yeah.
her junior year. That's when
But that was the drama. That game right there was kind of the drama that kickstarted so much.
that was it, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's when Clark did the retaliatory "You can't see me,"
Yeah.
even though, or I'm sorry, Reese did it, even though Clark hadn't done it to her. Had did it some other way, and they did. I think that the world cared a lot more than Clark and Reese cared about it. They seemed to kind of just deal with it and move on. But you're right. That's when we realized that something bigger was happening here. Iowa men's basketball has never really. It's fun. I loved it. It's fun to watch. They've had some occasional good players, Keegan Murray and those types of guys. But really, if University of Iowa sports goes national, it's going to be football. That's what's going to do it, right? But women's basketball, we did not expect that this was going to happen. It's always Notre Dame, UConn, Stanford, Baylor, that sort of a thing. It's the blue bloods. So to be a part of it and to see it happen and to be on the inside, and to see Clark and her coaches and her teammates get that sort of attention, it's been fun. It's been great. And I actually I only own one of her cards. I own a card that's one of these Bowman Nows, and it's from a game that I was at.
Oh,
And
that's nice.
yeah, it was the one where she broke the scoring record. The NCAA was beat Kelsey Plum's record.
Mhm.
And that's all I need, right? Otherwise, everything else is just a refractor. It's just a numbered card. But I've never had an attachment to a card before.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens when the Panini cards start coming out. I do have my eyes on one of her 2022 cards, one of her inserts that I'm going to be looking for at the National. But otherwise, to be able to connect with a card that way, it's sort of been able to sort of suppress the urge for FOMO, because I know that even if I had, say, like a gold refractor and I could have bought some at any time, I passed up on 3 opportunities to buy her first Bowman Chrome gold refractor, the non-auto, every time for under $300. Because I just wanted to spend money on something else or not spend the money. But it doesn't bother me that much, except from a financial standpoint, because I could sell that now for more. But that tells me that I've got something else there that not a lot of people do, which is, a direct connection to, this Bowman Now card.
Yeah. Well, you're talking like a collector now. I mean,
Right.
here you are buying a card because there's some meaning to it, right? You're looking at a specific card. You're not saying, well, I want to get the auto gold because I know in 6 months it's going to be worth $2,000 and I'm going to make X amount of money, right? In your mind, you're saying, look, I was at this game, right? I'm going to get this card. I'm going to treasure it. And it's going to remind me of this great game I was at and, things like that. So, it's good to hear that.
Yeah, and hopefully it might, there might be a bit of a psychological coping mechanism there. Try not to think about what if I had bought it and sold it now. I might be telling myself, "Oh, I don't want it anyway." That
You're
could
like,
be
why
part
did
of
you
it.
have to say something, man?
Yeah, right, exactly.
I could tell you last year I was at the National and people were coming with those gold autos and the green autos, and they were selling them for like $250, $300. And I bought 2 of them last, but I was just like, you know what? I never bought the gold. Right. And I was like, I don't want to buy too many of these things because I don't even know if there's really going to be a market for them, for me. And here's the thing, from being on my side, being the dealer in what my dealer mind, I know that college uniform stuff, doesn't sell well, and the bottom drops out very quickly. So I didn't want to start spending a big amount of money on a card thinking that I really could lose on it. So I turned away a lot of cards last year at the National. And then, come October, November, December, I was kicking myself saying, I'm looking at these cards now. I mean, these cards are selling in the thousands of dollars. And I was like, oh, I could have had these cards for $200-300. So, you know,
Yeah.
and if I was thinking of the collector mind and not worried about the money, I probably would have bought them at that time. Right. But in my head, being on the dealer end of it, I'm like, you know what? I'm afraid that the bottom's going to drop out on this, and I don't want to get stuck holding the ball. So,
But how could you know? There's never been a women's basketball player who has taken off like this. And so you were
yep.
doing the best with the information that you had at the time. The last player that I remember getting this much hype, I don't know, maybe Rebecca Lobo in the 90s or Cheryl Miller in the 80s. Nothing had ever happened like this. So, you know what? Everyone in the hobby has a story like this where we could
Yeah.
have made some money but didn't. So whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I do plenty fine with what I'm doing, right? I stick to the plan, but I tell you what, I mean, I have a whole thing here full of that you know last year, going to the National last year, I discovered that the women's stuff was sold so well last year. The soccer and the basketball, I really have just been collecting all year long. And a lot of this stuff, I go back and I forget about it. And recently, I just started going through it again, and I'm separating. I'm like, I really don't want to sell this. I really like this one too, And now I'm putting them aside. And I just mentioned that, all of a sudden, I have a Brittany Griner PC. I didn't even know I had one until I went through the box. I realized I had all these gold, PSA 10 cards of that. It just in autos and this and that. It just somehow just ended up that way, right? You never know what's going to happen. It just happens.
And who knows, right? I mean, this might be great for you with the national taking place right at the start of the Olympics, with soccer and basketball happening. You might be in for a nice little gold rush.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. That's, you know, try to zig when everybody's zagging. Yeah, I'm selling off all my football to the people who want to sell football at the National, and I'm going to come in hot with all the women's stuff, the soccer and the basketball. Yeah.
You're the Pied Piper.
Yeah. All right. So talk to me a little bit. You started the Shallow End podcast. You started that a little over a year ago, right? How long have you been doing it?
Yeah, so I started almost exactly a year ago. It was late May, early June, I forget when, of 23 is when I did it. I didn't really want to do it. I had done a podcast 10 years earlier, not sports related. It was tied to some different career of mine. And so I had a website which I was writing. It still exists, but I don't do a lot with it. I keep it up to date. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. But I was doing a lot of writing and interviewing people in print form or in written form. And it wasn't something I was really looking to do. And then Rob Gerard, the sports card therapist, sent me a message one day over Instagram because I was putting up some notes about content. And he goes, what do you like? What do you like on in terms of podcasting? What works for you? And I think he expected me to give a 3-word answer, right? But instead, I made him regret the question because I sent like this long response. You know how Instagram has a limit on how long your Instagram DMs can be. And I think it was like 2 or 3 long. And giving all this intricate breakdown, it was practically a white paper on the state of content and the hobby and everything else. And he just wrote back, do you want to do a podcast? And I wrote back, no. I said, no, I don't. Not really. But then I thought about it for a little while, and I said, if I can come up with an angle that isn't already being done and that is genuine and that people might find interesting and useful, then sure. And so I did. And then long story short, you all on the old network helped promote it and whatnot. And that's what kind of got me going, doing it a little bit. And I wanted to go, and I still kind of do, I wanted to go from the angle of people who are collecting but can't necessarily relate to the podcasts out there that are talking about these 4-figure deals and 5-figure deals, when I would argue, having not done an actual surveys, but I would argue most people are in the 2-figure range, right? They want to buy a card for $10 or $50, or maybe if it's really special, up to a couple of $100. And so that was the angle that I began the podcast from, and it's been really rewarding, and I've really enjoyed being able to connect with people over the last year.
So I notice you bring on a lot of guests, and I mean, I know I do more solos than guests, so I know how hard it is to come up with content all the time, and I guess some people will say it's the podcast hack, right? If you just bring guests on, all you have to do is just let everybody else provide the content. Like you're driving the car, and they're telling you where to go, type of thing. When you're looking for people or just coming up with ideas, you just talked about having an angle, and you talked about having, like, 2-figure type of cards. Give me just a little bit more, like, your thought process and what you're thinking when you're trying to identify a guest to come on, or you're saying, okay, I'm going to do an episode next week. And I'll tell you, I go out, and kind of my thing is I go to all these shows, and I come back and I talk about all my experiences at the shows. So I know that's where I'm identifying a lot of my, my content. Where do you identify yours?
Sure. So I'd like to pick people's brains about their collection. So I'm drawn to people who do something unique, or people who do something that I find interesting. And then I have them on almost selfishly, because I just want to ask them about it. I just want to pick their brain about it, is all. Like, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? Or, boy, tell me how that worked. I had a guy on late last year named Derek. He's Ray Langford collector, I think, on Instagram. And he's also ING Select. So he's a dealer. ING Select is his dealer name, but he also has a Ray Langford super collection. And Ray Langford was a St. Louis Cardinal during the 1990s, which was sort of a down period. I would say dark, but they just weren't as good as they were other parts. He has the most incredible collection that I've ever seen anyone have of a player, and it's of a good but not great player, someone who is fondly remembered in St. Louis, but not really beyond. And so we just talked for about an hour about how he digs for those types of cards and how he makes connections and what he wants to build. But the whole time I'm doing that, I'm trying to do two things with my brain at once. One, I'm trying to listen, to be a good active listener, so I can ask the next question or follow up on something. But at the same time, I'm taking mental notes about how maybe I can do this, because this seems like a really rewarding way to collect. And to bring it back to the whole idea of the shallow end, meaning 3 figures cards or less, this is a way to collect. Because if I want to put together a collection of, say, the 50 greatest LeBron cards or Barry Bonds cards, I'm going to have to go sell my house. It's not going to be able to work. But someone like Ray Langford, who he collects, or Brian Jordan, another Cardinal who I now collect, that's a shallow end type of collection. I've been able to put essential credentials and PMGs and all sorts of platinums and all sorts of other amazing cards of Brian Jordan into my Brian Jordan PC, because Derek showed me the way. And I was able to do so. If you added up just the Brian Jordan, the PMG, and the Platinum Medallion, and the Essential Credential, I think I got all 3 of them for a couple $100, right? And if you're going to be doing that with Derek Jeter or someone else who's high end, or Ken Griffey Jr., forget about it. So really, I'm trying to educate myself. Years ago, I talked to a Major League Baseball blogger, a writer. His name is Kevin Kaduk, and I asked him, "How do you come up with content constantly?" And I put out 1 episode a week. He was putting out 2 to 3 posts a day, because that was what the game was for him back then, right? And I said, "How do you figure out what people might want, what they want to click on?" And he kind of just waved me off. And he says, the best way to build an audience when you're in a global network, which is what the internet is just write for yourself, and people will find you. If you write what you find interesting, if you put out stuff that you are genuinely interested in, then in a planet with 7 billion people, somebody else is going to find that as well. And if just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent thinks that is also interesting, that is thousands of people who are going to be your audience. And
Yeah.
then the way to respect them is just to keep putting out that kind of content.
Yeah. That's a great answer. I never really actually, you know, thought about it that way, but yeah, what a great answer that is to think of it. Just put out what you love, right?
Yeah.
Do what you like to do. Do you? And it's like finding our own lane, right? And what we're doing is finding our own lane and then just being true to who we are. Right. It makes it easier. Like I talk to other people that do podcasts and they'll call me up and they'll be like, oh, I'm struggling and I'm like, well, what did you do in the hobby this week? I mean, that's me. That's what I do every week. What did I do in the hobby? What happened to me? What did I buy? What show did I go to? Who did I talk to? What new experience that I have? Like that type of thing. And yeah, and I think that's the easiest way to come up with content week after week after week. Because if you're really reaching for things, because I mean, in this space, and I'm going to get into talking a little bit about what you had been doing for the last year about kind of promoting other stuff, but I mean, in this space you're going to see a lot of people have dropped off over the last year, like stuff that I used to listen to and people I would listen to, like they just stopped creating content and things like that. So and I would know that it's hard, right? It would be hard to, if you weren't active in the hobby, if you weren't out doing something, it'd be hard to come up with content every week. You'd be actually trying to use other people's content to make it your own, right? And even people that have partners, right, that you get two people on there too, they'll have their differences. They're not going to be at peak performance week after week after week, and a lot of times you see them start to drop off too. So yeah. You have a background in journalism, right? And this is how I found you, right? Because I interviewed somebody and there was kind of a situation in the interview, and then someone said, "Hey, this guy wrote an article and he mentioned you and your podcast in it." And it was one of those situations in a podcast where I had said something in it and it kind of went on deaf ears and it moved on, and then you had mentioned it. And I'm like, "Oh, here's somebody who got it. They understood what I was doing," right? But it was all in written form. And when I was directed to your Instagram, right, I realized you had article after article after article that you were writing this stuff. And I'm like, who writes anymore? Who writes this stuff? Everybody talks about it. So just talk to me a little bit about, I mean, what kind of satisfaction you get out of writing, because you really must. If you're writing this stuff up, it really must feel good to do it.
I don't do it as much as I would like anymore. I put out a written piece last week for the first time, I think, in months or so. I think better when I write. So part of it is practical. I don't always think well on my feet. I'm glad that I don't do these podcasts live because I don't know what would come out of my mouth or would not come out of my mouth, right? But sort of the way I put things together, writing is just better for that. I'm one of these people who I'll get into a respectful argument with somebody at work or my wife or a discussion, and then 10 minutes later, after I've walked away, then I think about the right response, right? And then by then it's too late.
Yeah.
So writing is just sort of how I think. So that's why I do it. I do and would like to do more of it. I never want to promise that I'm going to do more of it because this content space is littered with people who say I'm going to produce more, and then they don't. So I try to put as little pressure on myself as possible. And if I write, then I write. And if I don't, then I don't. But, there are certain things that are better over podcasts, and there are certain things that are better in sort of that written space. And sometimes I think that critiques and responses to other people's work, criticism, I guess, is what you would call it, might be better, at least for me, in the written way. And I remember that piece that I wrote about your column. That's what we talked about when we first met at the National last year. You brought that up as well. It was just, it was a time to really kind of, flesh out this idea of, okay, well, this guy, Ken, I love his podcast. And his guest made this comment that was sort of a throwaway comment about gender roles, which is what it was. Yeah. And Ken stopped and he goes, well, actually, if I had done a whole podcast at that point, and I hadn't because I wasn't doing the podcast, that would have been a really awkward episode. because then it would have sounded like I was calling out the other guy, which I wasn't. He was a great guest as well. And
Yep.
so I think you have a little bit more control over the steering wheel. At least I do when I'm writing than when I'm talking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know the article you just dropped, A Question of Power, right? You just put out. And interestingly enough, just a few episodes ago, and that was just about having control while negotiating, right? That question of power. And a
Right.
few episodes ago, I talked about, that I learned a valuable lesson at the Fenway card show, that I had brought cards out that I priced over what the current comps were. I was firm on those prices, and I told myself when I was leaving, I'm not going to sell them for a penny less. And everybody came by. They all wanted to buy those cards, and I thought to myself, well, I probably shouldn't even have put them in the case, right? But most people say, you've got to put everything in the case. You never know what's going to sell. By the end of the show, people finally paid the price that I wanted on those. And I said, there was a valuable lesson learned there, that it was easy enough for me just to say, no, this is the price. And I'm absolutely firm on it. And since that, I've done a couple more shows and I've done the same thing, and it's worked beautifully, and when I read that article and you're talking about about who is in control and why they're in control, I thought to myself, man, that's the same lesson I just learned.
Well, I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think that's a coincidence, because I listened to that episode that you talked about with the Fenway show,
Yeah.
and it got me thinking. And I'm sure part of that trickled into it. Last Sunday, I went to, I think, my first card show of the year. One reason I like your podcast so much is because I have to live vicariously through you. We don't have shows every weekend. We have shows every couple of months. And so I went to one last Sunday, and I said, and I'm historically feel like I'm a terrible negotiator, and I give in because I know that I want to move my cards so that I can get other cards that I think I need to have right away, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I went in Sunday, and I did my prep work, and I had actually had a spreadsheet similar to what I had for the National last year, and I would show it to people, if they wanted to look at my cards or whatever. And I said, this is the average of the last two comps, right? Here's where I found it. Here's the date that I found it. I had all the data on that sheet, and I showed it to him. I didn't mind showing it to him. And finally, one guy goes, do you mind if I look at your cards? I said, sure. I had known him from before. He's a decent guy, but he's not a baseball guy. He's football and basketball. He looks at my cards and he goes, hey, blah, 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 come over here. So this other guy comes over, and this guy was baseball, and he's interested in buying my cards. He's like, what do you want for this? What do you want for this? What do you want for this? And I can feel myself. My heart rate starts to race. It's happening again. So I take a deep breath. Right. He's asking for these prices. And I said, no. Like I'm not going to give you these prices that you want. It's not my job to make you money.
Yeah.
That's not why I'm here. And so of the 7 or 8 cards that I was trying to sell, we agreed on a price for one of them. And the rest I just put back into my bag, and I'll bring them to National with me and try to move them there or something like that. But it felt good. And I had one of those weird adrenaline sugar crashes afterward. Right, where I did it. I actually got away without compromising. And it would have been nice to have the extra cash for National, but at what cost would that have been? Right, I would have been ticked off at myself for doing it. But instead, I walked away, still with the cards, -1, plus some extra cash for National, and my self-respect. Right, so but I think people really do. You call yourself Sports Card Lessons. I think people really do learn from you. I listen to you for the 2 reasons. 1, I want to hear what the card show scene is like. And 2, I want to know what it's like to be a dealer.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And it's, and being in the hobby and being a dealer are like 2 just completely different things. Right. And one thing you're just talking about there, being on both sides of the table. I mean, I understand, like, when you come to me and you say, look, I'm selling these cards, in my mind, if there's something I really want and I look at the price, the first thing I'm going to do is, I'm not going to say lowball you, but I'm not going to throw out a top price, immediately at you. So you have to be prepared to negotiate. Right. And I know there's a lot of people that show up that don't want to negotiate. Right. So I will say, for instance, if a card's worth $100 and I'll say, hey, I can give you 70 on that or 75. Sometimes people are like, no, I'm all set, and they'll walk away. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, we were just negotiating. Come back, like I could make a better. So now you have to start identifying, like with people, like you don't want to go too low, you don't want to go too high, and sometimes you just want to say, look, this is where I'm going to be, and it's yes or no, right?
I
So
imagine you have to really learn how to, you in your position and other dealers have to really learn how to read people
yeah,
fast,
yep,
right? Facial expressions, body language, that sort of thing.
yep. And I'll tell you, working in a prison all those years, and just observing everything around you and observing people all the time, and it helps me a lot, and I tell people all the time, it helps me a lot. It helps me read people. Like I'm one of those people that can see somebody or meet somebody and read them pretty quickly. And I think it helps me a lot too when I'm at these shows and people are walking up I just did an episode with Joe from Premier Sports Cards, and he was an ex-police officer, right, retired police officer, and he we were just talking about the same thing, the body language with the case, how you turn the case, like when somebody comes up, if they got the case close to them and they're pulling one card out, there's probably a lot more good cards in that case that you're not looking at. They're just pulling out. But I did episodes on that, in season 2 and season 3 about, don't give somebody control. Don't hand them your whole case, hold back the good stuff. Try to peddle the junk off first before you dip into the more popular things, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
there's a lot of jockeying going on at card shows. And I'm sad to hear you don't get to go to many. I mean, I know Iowa's a big state,
It's a big state. There are some pretty decent shows. They're just not all that frequent. There's one that's 20 minutes from here. They do it once a month. It's brutal. But the one that's about 4 to 6 times a year that I went to Sunday, it's pretty good. It's about 80 tables. And then there's one that is about a month after the National. It's happening for the first time, and they're advertising 250 tables. And that's about an hour from my house. And so I am circling that one on the calendar. And if I don't know what I'll have left at that point, a month after the National, but I firmly plan on going there.
I like a lot of these states, coming up. It helps me like try to visit different states, right? And it's a great excuse. I could say, well, honey, they have a card show there. I mean, I've got to go, right? I got to go see I know they got some great card shows in Hawaii. So.
There you go. It's a tax write-off. Yeah. You would do well in Iowa. Iowa is big for cards anyway. Baseball and football. That's the things people care about. The people who try to put basketball in their cases, from what I can tell, don't do especially well here. But football and baseball.
Yeah. I had a son. My son went out to. He was invited out to try out for the Iowa Blackhawks. So that was the only time I'd ever been to Iowa, and brought him out there for a tryout for that teams. And the whole town was crazy, over hockey, right? It was just, everything was revolved around this hockey team. I mean, even the tryouts, the building was sold out, it was like sold out arena for tryouts. So I would have to imagine, I mean, I don't know, you can tell me that. I mean, I would think hockey is probably a decent collected sport there, or not really?
Depends what part. So the Blackhawks. I think some other franchise owns that minor league team now, but that's not too far from the Minnesota border where you were. So that wouldn't surprise me at all if that was a hockey crazy area.
Yeah. So the National, you going this year?
Going. I will be there. Got my hotel. Got my tickets. I will be driving in all day Wednesday to get there. And then so I will be attending Thursday and Friday. Last year, I was there just on Friday. Was not enough time. So I'm excited to be there now for 2 days.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know. I've never done the National in Cleveland, but I know Chicago was just crazy with all these rooms in different directions. It was hard to try to figure out how to get through. And I think Cleveland, from what people are saying, it's going to be easier to, get through to know that you've seen everything and not missed anything.
Everyone's saying that Chicago is a better town for tourists as they're hosting it because you could fly into O'Hare and you're right there, and all the hotels are with a 2-minute walking distance or less, and that Cleveland is less amenable to tourists, but the facility itself is better because there's big space between the rows, and it's just the air conditioning works, right? And where in Chicago that didn't happen.
Internet, internet
Yeah.
works too.
Yeah, the networks do. Yeah, so I'm hearing that the show experience while you're in the room will be better, but it'll be the nightlife that takes the hit.
Yeah, just being so far, everything's far. I mean, even the hotels are all like 6 to 10 miles away, and things like that. Will you? I mean, for the evening, are you looking forward to doing any of the after shows or trade nights or?
Yep, all of the above, right?
Yeah.
I'm going there with a friend. We've already made, dinner reservations for Wednesday night when we get there. We're planning now, do we want to hit those new shows that are popping up at night? Do we want to go to trade nights? And the answer is yes to all of the above.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe you've already said it. What are you looking forward to the most out there?
Just seeing people, right? I learned last year was my first year at the National, and I learned that if you're going for some hyper specific cards, to steal a cliche, it's a needle in a haystack, right? So I'll be prepared, and there's certain cards that I want. I've got a list of 10, 12 cards that I'll be looking for. But beyond that, I just look forward to meeting some people and shaking hands of people who I've only talked to online, and hanging out at trade nights or after trade nights, or grabbing a meal or grabbing some coffee or a beer or something like that, right? So I think that's really what I'm most looking forward to.
Those 10 or so cards you're looking for, are they common cards that you can find anywhere on eBay, or are these cards that you really haven't seen anywhere? And
great question. So I have tiered my want list, and if you saw my spreadsheet, you probably would have me committed. But I've got my spreadsheet going, and I've got 3 or 4 cards on my list that are highly and wildly common, and I can go on eBay right now and find 20 to 50 copies of any of them to buy. And those are what I'm calling my safety cards. Those are the ones that if I can't find anything else I'm looking for, I know that I can come away with those cards, right? It's things like, how can I have a baseball card collection but not have an 89 Upper Deck Griffey, right? I pack pulled one when I was a kid, but a few years ago when I went home and got my collection and sold it off, that was one of the ones I graded and sold off. But now I want to have one back. But I guarantee there will be 50 tables there that are selling an 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. So that's one of them, right? A Reggie Jackson rookie that's on the list. I'm sure any of the vintage dealers will be selling a Reggie Jackson rookie. And I put those safety cards on there to make sure that I get to have some fun. So if the cards that I are more scarce, if I can't find those, at least I can go like, well, I got my Reggie there. I got my Ken Griffey Jr. there. I might even pick up a Caitlin Clark there, unless the prices are outrageous. But I also have some cards on the list that will be harder to find. And one of those that if you're looking and you're scanning somebody's case, that if you actually see one somewhere in the corner, all of a sudden, ooh, the alert goes up, right? And the heart races and you're like, go time, let's do this, right? And you start making your way in. And it's like, first thing, what are you asking, right? Okay, do you do trade and cost? And hopefully they have prices on it. It's one of my pet peeves is dealers that don't price their cards. It's like, fine. Okay, how much you're asking for?
Don't look too excited when you show up. Right?
Yeah. Oh no. The poker face will be there.
But do the big Ken thing. You go up and you see the card, and you look at another card like 2 cards away from it, and you ask them what they're asking on that card instead, not the one you're looking at. Okay. And then you kind of go, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, oh, what are you asking for that crap over there?
Yeah, so I'm a mark, right? I'm one of the marks, right? So I go there. I'm locking right in, right? I'm the quarterback who throws the pick because I don't check off. I go straight for the the flanker who I know I want to hit anyway, right? So I think I'll try that, right? So for example, one of the cards I want to grab, it's not rare, but it's one of his better cards. I want to get Ichiro's SP Authentic Rookie out of 1250, and with him being up for the Hall of Fame, I think it's later this year is when the vote is for him, and he'll get in easy. I love that card. I love the design of that card. And when I first got back into the hobby, that's not a card that I could have even thought about getting, but just the design of it, the aesthetics, and there's some good value to it as well. Yeah, so I think if that's one card I'll be looking for, and if I see that, I'll be sure to look for the left and be like, oh, you got the Ichiro too. That's neat. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
What are you asking for that one?
yeah. You could throw that in.
That's right. Yeah, we give me that one plus this other one for, and then I'll try to work some sort of a deal. I'll do the card collector 2 thing. I learned a lot by watching him on YouTube as well, where I see how he'll pick out 3 or 4 cards, and then he'll try to bring it down from, well, if I buy 3 or 4, then what can you do for me? And so I'm always trying to learn from guys like you and him and everybody else.
Yeah, I never understood that. I get that a lot, and you know, and I say, look, whether you buy one or the whole row, I mean, I still have to be at the same percentage. You know, all of a sudden, if you're buying more, it doesn't mean I got this card cheaper than, you know what I'm saying? It really comes down to, you know, if you're one of the cards you pick, I'm really into it. Well, like maybe I can, you know, do a little better on it, but at the end of the day, they should be let's just figure out a percentage and just go right across the board. It doesn't. I mean, I can't throw a free card in. It's not like buy 5 get 1 free type of thing. You know,
it's like when you bought a car back in the 90s. They said, we'll throw in a free leather treatment. Well, okay, great, thanks. Right?
Yeah.
It's
the Under Armour.
It's Under Armour. It makes me laugh when I'll be watching online. Like I said, I don't get to a lot of shows, and I hear someone say, I got to be at whatever price.
Yeah.
And if I'm the other person, I'm thinking, no, you don't. You want to be at, you know, need and want and got are 3 different things.
Yeah.
You know,
and
so,
it depends how you just came to the table too. You know, how you show up at the table depends how that negotiation is going to go. If you show up and you say, oh my God, there's the Ichiro card I've been looking for forever. Like, I'm just like, okay, this is good. I'm just sitting back. I'm just reeling you in, you know, at this point. But
well, I learned, I learned one of the things I don't do anymore is I never pull my cards out now until the dealer says, do you mind if I take a look? Because now I'm not asking. Now they are asking, and I can play the whole, I'm not sure I even want to sell type of card. It's a game.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. And being a dealer, like for me, I never really open my case, and you know, unless I find something that I say, hey, maybe we'll work out a trade for it or something like that, and then I'll look in and pull some cards out. But if I'm walking a show, I never, you know, relinquish my case or my cards to anybody because I know that, you know, probably the best I'm getting is 80 or 85%, and I can do better than that myself at a show. So there's no sense. You know, and I come home from a show all the time, and the first thing my wife says, "Did you sell anything?" I'm like, I'm not going to sell. I'm going to buy. You know, I'm going to spend money, not make money. But yeah.
So let me ask you a question because I'm fascinated by this whole Repackers thing. I made a Repacker joke at the show I was at last Sunday. They don't know what I was talking about. So I'll talk to someone who actually goes to shows, you know, where it's more common. The National is a different animal, right? Hundreds and hundreds, if not, you know, last year, more tables than that. Do you think that the Repackers will have a presence at the National the way they've had presence at the large regional shows?
I think so. Yep. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they go out there and do the same thing there? I mean,
well, the reason why I'm sorry to cut you off. You said, why wouldn't they? The reason going in my mind, I don't know if this is a correct assumption or not, but my thought is if I'm TriStar, if I'm people who are putting on that show, and I know that the Repackers are going to raid those cases, the people who are going to be coming on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe even Sunday, the people who are just going to be coming there like the moms and dads and their kids, and they're going to see like more sparse cases. I think that
doesn't care. They don't care.
They don't care. Yeah.
No, they don't care. I mean, a show's a show. You know, if you wanted to keep more inventory in your case, then don't sell to them. Sell it for higher. Sell it for 100%. Hold out to be 100% or 105%. It doesn't matter to them because the Repackers aren't coming to buy the cards to resell to someone. They're not selling to people at that show. They're taking those cards. They're leaving. Those cards are going to somebody else. They're being put into repacks. Right. And now, because of the way they're sold with a bottom, you know, a floor and a ceiling and all these cards in between, I mean, they're making over 100% back on every one of those cards. So it doesn't matter if they're buying them at 90%, 93%, 95%, because, you know, they're making their money on the back end of those, and they're not it's not like they're buying them and then putting them putting them in another case somewhere else. They're leaving the show. They're buying these cards, and these cards are exiting the show. They're not being resold in the show. So, and nobody really cares, the promoters, they don't care. I mean, most of the shows I do, I see the promoters let these guys in early, or I don't know if they're letting them in, or, somebody like me who says, hey, yeah, I've got an extra dealer badge. You can take it and go shop the room while I'm setting up, type of thing. I don't know if that's more of what's happening, but I see them a lot to get in before the show even starts, walking around the room, making their sales. So yeah,
What you're saying, what you're saying makes perfect sense. I totally
Yeah.
hear what you're saying, and I think the way I always come from it from the perspective of the collectors and the little guy type of thing, and that sounds pretentious, but you know what I'm getting at. Where and it doesn't really affect me a whole lot because I don't collect ultra modern, and that seems to be a lot of what repackers are going for. But I would just feel bad if someone drove in from, say, Cincinnati or Detroit, and it's a family day, and you get there and it's like, oh, some kid just wants to get a Jalen Hurts, or some kid just wants to get a Wemby, and they're gone, right? And they're gone.
They're never going to be gone. Have you looked at these pop counts? Have you looked at the production run, the print runs on these cards? They're never going to be gone. I don't care who you are. You're going to go in there.
Numbers for Wemby the other day, and I can't believe how high those numbers are already that have been graded. It's
I know. Somebody had said to me, I was on the phone with somebody the other day, and I don't remember the exact number. We were talking about the Prism Silver, and I was saying, and the price comes down, maybe I would buy a few and put them instead of, usually this is the time of year I would buy hockey, but I'm not going to buy hockey next year, right? So I said maybe I'd buy some of those and put them aside, and he said, yeah, that's fine. He said, can take a guess of what the print run is. And I wasn't even close. I mean, I threw out a high number. I wasn't even close. And I was like, wow, that is pretty high. And they're grading more and more, just coming off the line every single day. So yeah, you're never going to run out of, if you're going there looking for any ultra modern card, you're going to find it. I would have to say, I don't even know what the print run is. On like a CJ Stroud, Prism Silver PSA 10, but I bet you every single one is going to be in Cleveland. Everybody's going to be selling it. So whatever the price is now, I think when you get there and all those cards show up in everyone's cases, I think those prices are going to be down. I think that's going to drive the prices down on a lot of these cards.
Yeah.
So
it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting for sure. With between the National, and then you've got a month later, you've got Fanatics coming in strong, right? With what they're going to do, and it's an interesting time in the hobby, that's for sure.
Yeah. What do you think about that? What do you think? And I know you just interview somebody, right? It was you that interviewed somebody about who's going to Fanatics instead of the National.
I interviewed Clark, and Clark is he's the one behind a 5-card guys and Cards to the Moon. Just a really wonderful dude. But yeah, he lives in Toronto, near Toronto, and had never been to a major card show in the States, and had told his buddies on his podcast that this was the year he was going to go to National. He's going to finally go. Cleveland's not that far. And then about a month and a half later, he changed his mind and decided he'd rather go to Fanatics Fest in New York. So he and his friends are doing that now instead. I think that the folks at the National need to watch out, honestly. I think they need to be careful and not rest on their laurels. I don't think the National is going to go away here or anything like that. But I think when you have somebody with deep pockets who is driven and has hired really good people to move into your space, you need to be careful. I heard one of the guys that I forget on the show, I feel bad that I forget who interviewed them now, but I heard one of the Fanatics Fest guys who's putting on the show, when I heard them interviewed and the homework that they put into it and everything that they have planned and the market research and all the sorts of things. And then somebody asked them about the National. He goes, oh, we don't want to move into their space. No. This is different. I thought, oh boy, that knife is going right in the back, right? That knife is going in the back.
Yeah.
I
heard that same interview. I think you're talking about. Yeah, I heard that same interview, and they said no. I'm trying to remember. It was the guy from Fanatics. It was the guy that was running the.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't think of his name either. But yeah, I heard that same interview, and as soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, George, why don't you just tell us that's what you're doing? You just want to replace them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they want to do. And
Yeah.
the national is not going to go away, but it can certainly be reduced, right? If there's a viable alternative,
Yeah.
sure, why not? There's always room, and Fanatics Fest sounds like fun, and I will be going to the national again next year in 25 because it's back in Chicago, and that's so close to where I live.
Yeah. Well,
But
next 3 years. Next 3
the next
years.
3 years, next three
Yeah.
years, but if they don't figure some things out with dealers, the situation that they keep doing things quote unquote the way it's always been done, and people are reporting that they're having a really great time at the Fanatics events, I will check it out. I'd love to go to an event in Dallas or Burbank or something like that. I'd love to see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So essentially, just sort of the way I am as a personality wise is I don't like it when people are content, or when organizations are content and they aren't willing to step up their game. And so if because it shows that they are taking their audience and their customers for granted. And if I do reach the point where I feel like the national / TriStar expects me to go because that's just what I've always done, and they don't incentivize me to keep going, then sure, in a couple of years I will put my time and money elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and I imagine too, all these people that have set up these after show shows, right? All the people who are buying tables at these shows, all the people who've lost their table space because of the rules, at the national. If you turned around and Fanatics said, "Oh yeah, we have all these tables available," all those people would buy, and that's where their focus would be. They would just I think they would all just bail on the national, and then they would just do these Fanatic shows instead. And I think if Fanatics knows this, they don't need to hear me on Sports Card Lessons podcast saying that. I mean, I know they know this, so I'm sure they just feel right now if they make the right moves, they'd be ripe for the picking. Just to take that all away. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen. How successful this show is in New York City and moving forward, because I know they've talked about having it. I think was in San Diego, right? Kind of where the Comic Cons are, right? New York,
Orlando
San
near
Diego.
Disney. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, and we saw.
And that's great. Like Orlando, I wouldn't mind going to Orlando, right? I mean, I live right next to New York, so I've been there enough times. But
yeah, go to the card show and then have meet your grandkids down there and go to Disney.
Yeah,
It's perfect.
absolutely.
When you see what Fanatics did to Panini, with not just with the licenses, because that's just business, but in like stealing away the licenses for Wembanyama and Stroud and others.
Yeah.
You think they won't do that to TriStar? You think they won't do that to whoever gets in their way? We know what their business tactics are, and you saw what Fanatics did even before they got into the card space when they were just in apparel. We know what they are willing to do.
Yeah. Who knows? They don't come in and take over the national.
Right. Or Burbank, or you hear rumors of Dallas. I don't know why Dallas would sell it. I hear it's such an amazing show, but you hear all these. Why wouldn't they? And after a while, when the 2,000-pound gorilla becomes the 20,000-pound gorilla, you don't even have a choice of saying yes. You just have to say yes. Okay.
Yeah.
What do I sign?
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing left. It's like the old Goodfellas movie, right? At the end, it's like there's nothing left. Just let it go.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Right. And then Panini is Joe Pesci walking into the room like, "Hey, where are we going, guys?"
Dave, man, this was awesome. I'm so happy you came on. I had a lot of fun today doing this.
This was great. Anytime. I look forward to seeing you in Cleveland and listening to all your stuff and just talking whenever. This is great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we're gonna plan a meetup. We're gonna definitely plan a meetup out there and hang out. Maybe grab that coffee or beer or a dinner or something out there. Definitely gonna do that. Tell everyone where they can find you if they have questions, they want to reach out, where they can find your podcast, The Shallow End, where if they want to give that a listen, and even your articles that you write, if they want to read those as well.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Iowa Dave Sports Cards. That's Iowa_Dave_sports cards. My podcast, The Shallow End, releases every Friday. And every now and then when I'm motivated, hobbycontent.com is where you can find what I write. But even if you want to go there, not for the writing, I keep a list there of all active hobby podcasters. So you can, if you've listened to everything Ken puts out, and if you're listening to the stuff that I put out, there's about a list of about 60 there right now that are updated regularly. You can click there and get to their link, and find something else that's good to listen to.
Great. Okay, man. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you next month in Cleveland.
See you next month.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please definitely subscribe. And most importantly, tell a friend and spread the word. Until next time, take care of yourselves and everyone around you. Thanks, Dave.